for independent reading. From the Autobiography of Malcolm X by Malcolm X with Alex Haley. It was because of my letters that I happened to stumble upon starting to acquire some kind of homemade education. I became increasingly frustrated at not being able to express what I wanted to convey in letters that I wrote, especially those to Mr. Elijah Muhammad. In the street, I had been the most articulate hustler out there. I had commanded attention when I said something. But now, trying to write simple English, I not only wasn't articulate, I wasn't even functional. How would I sound writing in slang the way I would say it? Something such as, "Look, Daddy, let me pull your coat about a cat, Elijah Muhammad." Many who today hear me somewhere in person or on television, or those who read something I've said, will think I went to school far beyond the eighth grade. This impression is due entirely to my prison studies. It had really begun back in the Charleston prison when Bimby first made me feel envy of his stock of knowledge. Bimby had always taken charge of any conversation he was in, and I had tried to emulate him. But every book I picked up had a few sentences which didn't contain anywhere from one to nearly all of the words that might as well have been in Chinese. When I just skipped those words, of course I really ended up with a little idea of what the book said. So I had to come to the Norfolk prison colony still going through only books reading motions. Pretty soon, I would have quit even these motions unless I had received the motivation that I did. I saw that the best thing I could do was get hold of a dictionary to study, to learn some words. I was lucky enough to reason also that I should try to improve my penmanship. It was sad. I couldn't even write in a straight line. It was both ideas together that moved me to request a dictionary along with some tablets and pencils from the Norfolk Prison Colony School. I spent 2 days rifling uncertainly through the dictionary's pages. I'd never realized so many words existed. I didn't know which words I needed to learn. Finally, just to start some kind of action, I began copying in my slow, painstaking, ragged handwriting. I copied into my tablet everything printed on the first page down to the punctuation marks. I believe it took me a day. Then aloud, I read back to myself everything I'd written on the tablet. Over and over aloud to myself, I read my own handwriting. I woke up the next morning thinking about those words, immensely proud to realize that not only had I written so much at one time, but I'd written words that I never knew were in the world. Moreover, with a little effort, I also could remember what many of those words meant. I reviewed the words whose meaning I didn't remember. Funny thing from the dictionary's first page right now that aardvark springs to my mind. The dictionary had a picture of it. A long tailed, long eared, burrowing African mammal which lived off termites caught by sticking its tongue out as an anteater does for ants. I was so fascinated that I went on. I copied the dictionary's next page, and the same experience came when I studied that. With every succeeding page, I also learned of people and places and events from history. Actually, the dictionary is like a miniature encyclopedia. First, finally, the dictionary's A section was filled a whole tablet, and I went into the B's. That was the way I started copying what eventually became the entire dictionary. It went a lot faster after so much practice helped me to pick up handwriting speed. Between what I wrote in my tablet and writing letters during the rest of my time in prison, I would guess I wrote a million words. I suppose it was inevitable that as my words base broadened, I could, for the first time, pick up a book and read and now begin to understand what the book was saying. Anyone who has read a great deal can imagine the new world that opened. Let me tell you something. From then until I left that prison, in every free moment I had, if I was not reading in the library, I was reading on my bunk. You couldn't have gotten me out of books with a wedge. Between Mr. Muhammad's teachings, my correspondence, my visitors, usually Ella and Reginald, and my readings of books, months passed without my even thinking about being imprisoned. In fact, up to then, I never had been so truly free in my life. The Norfolk Prison Colony's library was in the school building. A variety of classes was taught there by instructors who came from such places as Harvard and Boston University. The weekly debates between inmates and teams were also held in the school building. You would be astonished to know how worked up convict debaters and audiences would get over subjects like, should babies be fed milk? Available on the prison library shelves were books on just about every general subject. Much of the private collection that Parkhurst had willed to the prison was still in crates and boxes in the back of the library. Thousands of old books. Some of them looked ancient, covers faded, and old time parchment looking binding. Parkhurst, I've mentioned, seemed to have been principally interested in history and religion. He had the money and the special interest to have a lots of books that you wouldn't have in general circulation. Any college library would have been lucky to get that collection. As you can imagine, especially in a prison where there were heavy emphasis on rehabilitation, an inmate was smiled upon if he demonstrated an unusually intense interest in books. There was a sizable number of well read inmates, especially the popular debaters. Some were said by many to be practically walking encyclopedias. They were almost celebrities. No university would ask any student to devour literature, as I did when the New World opened to me, of being able to read and understand. I read more in my room than in the library itself. An inmate who was known to read a lot could check out more than the permitted maximum number of books. I prefer reading in the total isolation on my own room. When I had progressed to really serious reading every night about 10 p.m., I would be outraged with the lights out. It always seemed to catch me at right in the middle of something engrossing. Fortunately, right outside my door was a corridor light that cast a glow into my room. The glow was enough to read by once my eyes adjusted to it. So when lights out came, I would sit on the floor where I could continue reading in that glow. At 1 hour intervals, the night guard paced past every room. Each time I heard the approaching footsteps, I jumped into bed and feigned sleep. As soon as the guard passed, I got back out of the bed onto the floor area of that light glow where I could read for another 58 minutes until the guard approached again. Then went on until 3 or 4 that went on until 3 or 4 every morning. 3 or 4 hours of sleep was enough for me. Often in the years in the streets, I had slept less than that. Related reading Aardvark by Julie Fields. Since Malcolm died, that old Aardvark had got a sort of fame for himself. I mean, of late, when I read the dictionary the first time, the things I see is the animal staring at me. And then I think of Malcolm. how he read in the prisons and on the plains and everywhere, and how he wrote about old aardvark. Looks like Malcolm X helped bring attention to a lot of things we never thought before. Malcolm X, 1925 to 1965. My whole life had been a chronological of changes. Preacher. While Malcolm X was in prison, he began to follow the teachings of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, also known as the Black Muslims. Upon his release from prison, he became a Black Muslim minister and gained a wide reputation as a powerful speaker. Malcolm X preached in favor of Black power and Black nationalism, opposing white oppression and integration. Pilgrim. Because of a dispute with the faith, Malcolm X was expelled from the Black Muslims. After that, Malcolm X became a follower of traditional Islam. While on a pilgrimage to Mecca, the holy place of the Islamic faith, Malcolm X came to believe in the possibility of brotherhood among peoples. Author. Upon his return to America, Malcolm X began to work on his autobiography with Alex Haley, who later wrote Roots. On February 21st, 1965, Malcolm X was assassinated. His autobiography was published after his death.